I will be gentle and take it slow, he promised the young virgin bride on their first night of love. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Ivy couldn't help but fidget with the hem of her second-hand dress as she walked through the doors of the upscale restaurant. The chatter of well-dressed patrons and the soft clinking of silverware filled the air, the dim, warm lighting casting an elegant glow over everything. It felt like a scene straight out of a movie, a world she didn't belong to. She had promised her best friend, Jenny, that she would try to push past her insecurities and go through with this blind date. But as she scanned the room, her nerves got the better of her. Her shoes, scuffed and worn, tapped lightly against the marble floor. Her reflection in the glass window made her pause, second-hand dress, chipped heels, and hands shaking. Asterisk, you've got this, Ivy. You promised. Asterisk, she whispered under her breath as she took a deep breath and pushed forward. Her eyes landed on him, a sharply dressed man sitting alone at the far end of the room, absorbed in his phone. That must be him, she thought. She straightened her posture and walked over, trying to calm her racing heart. Hi, you must be Kevin, she said with a nervous smile. The man looked up, startled. He blinked at her for a moment, his expression blank. Hi? I'm Ivy. The man's confusion lingered for a moment before he forced a smile. Hi, Ivy. She misread his hesitation as shyness, thinking he was just awkward, and took a seat across from him. Asterisk, I guess this is fine. Asterisk, she thought. Asterisk, maybe this won't be as bad as I expected. Asterisk, I know this is awkward, she started, trying to break the silence. Blind dates are always kind of weird, right? Kevin nodded, clearly not quite understanding what was going on. Yeah, he said slowly. They are. She laughed nervously, hoping to ease the tension. Jenny told me you might be a little shy, so don't worry, I can talk enough for both of us. Kevin shifted in his seat, his phone buzzing quietly in his hand. I'm sure we'll be fine, he said, half smiling, though his eyes remained fixed on his screen. Ivy took a sip of her water, trying to regain some semblance of composure. The conversation started slow, but eventually, she relaxed and found herself telling him about her life, working 2 jobs just to pay rent, trying to make ends meet. It's not glamorous, she said with a shrug, but it's enough to get by. I'm a waitress. She avoided his gaze as she spoke, suddenly feeling small. Kevin raised an eyebrow. A waitress, he repeated, his voice soft. Ivy nodded, glancing down at her lap. Yeah, not the most glamorous job, but it's honest work. He studied her for a moment, something in his gaze changing. It sounds like you work hard. You must have big dreams. Ivy smiled, her cheeks flushing. I do, actually. I want to open an art studio one day. That's amazing, he said, sounding genuinely interested. Ivy felt a sense of warmth spread through her chest at the kindness in his voice. Asterisk, maybe this won't be so bad after all. Asterisk, she thought. But then, her phone buzzed on the table. Jenny's message flashed across the screen. Hey, Ivy. Where are you? I'm at table 7, looking forward to meeting you. Ivy's heart sank as she read the message again. Her stomach churned. She glanced up at Kevin, her face turning bright red with embarrassment. You're not Kevin, are you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kevin's smile faltered, and his eyes flashed with guilt. No, I'm not. He hesitated, then continued, I'm sorry, I should have said something sooner. Ivy quickly stood, the embarrassment flooding over her like a wave. Oh my God, she muttered. I'm so sorry. I sat at the wrong table. This is so embarrassing. She turned and bolted for the door, trying to avoid making eye contact with anyone. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, her heart racing. Kevin stood as well, his voice calling after her. "Ivy, wait!" But she didn't stop. She kept running, her steps growing faster as she pushed through the door and into the cold night air. As she hurried down the street, she could hear him calling her name, but she didn't look back. She had to get away. She had made a complete fool of herself. Later that night, back in the safety of her small apartment, Ivy collapsed onto the couch, groaning into a throw pillow. Her face burned with embarrassment as she replayed the scene over and over in her head. Jenny peeked over the edge of her laptop, an amused expression on her face. "That bad, ho?" she asked. Ivy sat up, shaking her head. "Worse. I sat at the wrong table. I spent the entire dinner talking to some random guy thinking he was Kevin." Jenny tried to hold back a laugh but failed. "What happened?" she asked, still snickering. Ivy buried her face in her hands. "He was nice. Really nice. But I ran out of there like an idiot when I realized." Jenny grinned. "Sounds like something out of a rom-com," Ivy groaned again, grabbing the pillow and burying her face in it. "I just hope I never see him again." Jenny raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about that? You said he was nice." Ivy lifted the pillow slightly, peeking out at her friend. "Yeah, he was. But it doesn't matter. I made a complete fool of myself." Jenny shrugged. "People make mistakes. And hey, if he was as nice as you say, maybe he didn't mind." As if on cue, Ivy's phone buzzed again. This time, a new message appeared on the screen, and her breath caught in her throat. It was from Kevin. "Hey Ivy, this is Kevin. The guy you sat next to at the restaurant tonight. I know it was a mix-up, but I'd like to see you again. How about coffee sometime?" Ivy's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the message, her thoughts racing. Could this be real? She showed the message to Jenny, who grinned widely. "Well, what are you going to do?" Jenny asked, teasing. Ivy bit her lip, her finger hovering over the keyboard. After a moment of hesitation, she typed a response, "Okay. Coffee sounds nice." She set the phone down, still unsure if this was the right decision, but something about his message felt different. Maybe this was an opportunity she shouldn't pass up. "Well," Jenny said with a wink, "this should be interesting." Ivy laughed softly, feeling a tiny bit of hope spark in her chest. Asterisk, maybe this mistake won't be so bad after all. Asterisk, and with that, she took a deep breath, ready for whatever came next. But the next morning, as Ivy was finishing her shift at the diner, her phone buzzed once again. This time, it was a call from a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello," she said cautiously. Ivy's deep voice on the other end of the line asked. "It's Kevin. We met last night. I was wondering if you had some time to meet for coffee." "I really meant what I said." Ivy's heart skipped again. Something in his voice sounded different now, more earnest, more real. She glanced around the diner, trying to focus. Yeah, I think I have time," she said finally. "Great," Kevin replied. "I'll text you the details." As the call ended, Ivy stood frozen for a moment, still processing everything that had just happened. Could this really be the start of something good? Or was it just another mistake waiting to happen? She didn't know yet. But one thing was for sure, she was about to find out. Ivy woke up the next morning to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. Groggily, she reached for it, still feeling the weight of yesterday's embarrassment. She saw the message from Kevin again. "Hey Ivy, this is Kevin. The guy you sat next to last night. I know it was a mix-up, but I'd really like to see you again. Coffee sometime." Her heart skipped a beat, and she couldn't help but smile. Asterisk, what if it's fate? Asterisk, she thought. She hadn't expected him to reach out after she had literally bolted from the restaurant. But there it was, a second chance. She hesitated for a moment, chewing her bottom lip. Should I do this? But before she could talk herself out of it, she quickly typed back, okay, coffee sounds nice. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard as she sent the message, unsure of what was going to happen next. When the reply came, it was swift. Great. How about the cafe on 5th and Maple at noon? It seemed casual, no pressure. Ivy agreed, feeling the tension in her chest loosen just a little. The rest of the morning was a blur of getting ready, trying to find something. That didn't make her feel out of place. She chose a simple dress, nothing fancy, just enough to feel comfortable. As she walked to the cafe, her thoughts kept swirling. What will he be like? Ivy had no idea. The truth was, she had never imagined herself going out with someone like him. Kevin had been calm, polite, but something about him seemed different. It wasn't just the way he dressed or the fact that he didn't seem to mind her rambling nervously the night before. There was something more. When Ivy arrived at the cafe, she spotted him right away. Kevin was sitting at a small table in the corner, a cup of coffee already in front of him. His jacket was off, and he looked relaxed, even approachable. She took a deep breath and walked over. "Hey," she said softly, offering a hesitant smile. He looked up and smiled back, his expression warming. "Hey Ivy, I'm glad you could make it." She sat down, trying to ignore the fluttering in her stomach. "Thanks for inviting me. I didn't expect to hear from you after last night," she said, her voice a little quieter than usual. Kevin chuckled, taking a sip of his coffee. "I figured you'd be embarrassed, but I really wanted to talk to you more. You were different. In a good way." Ivy felt her cheeks heat up again. "Different? How so?" He leaned back in his chair, looking at her with interest. "I don't know, you weren't like the people I usually meet. You didn't ask about my job or my background." "It was refreshing," he said, his tone soft but sincere. Ivy shifted in her seat, feeling a little self-conscious. "Well, I didn't want to make assumptions. You looked like you were just there. Like the rest of us." She shrugged, trying to sound casual, but her nerves were still on edge. Kevin smiled, and for a moment, Ivy thought she saw something in his eyes, a glimpse of real emotion. "Yeah, I guess I do try to blend in. But you were the first person in a long time who actually looked at me like I was normal," he said, his voice quiet. Ivy blinked, not quite sure how to respond. She had no idea what to make of him. His life seemed so different from hers. But something about him was relatable. It was as if they were both trying to navigate their own worlds. "So, what do you do?" Ivy asked, suddenly curious. Kevin paused, almost as if he were considering whether or not to tell her. "I'm in tech. But I also work with a foundation, helping underprivileged kids get access to better education and opportunities." Ivy raised an eyebrow, surprised by his answer. "That's really impressive," she said, genuinely impressed. Kevin gave a small laugh. "It's not glamorous, but it feels good to help where I can." Ivy nodded, feeling like she was starting to see him in a different light. "I admire that," she said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. Ivy could feel the tension easing. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was trying too hard. She felt as normal. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and before long, they were talking about their favorite books, movies, and even embarrassing childhood stories. Ivy found herself laughing, the nervousness slowly fading. It wasn't as awkward as she had imagined. She was starting to enjoy herself. But just as the conversation felt like it was flowing naturally, Kevin's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and sighed, looking a little uncomfortable. "Sorry, I need to take this," he said, standing up and walking a few feet away. Ivy watched him, her mind racing. What was going on with him? Why did he look so different now? She tried to ignore the unease creeping up on her as she took a sip of her coffee. After a few minutes, Kevin returned, a different expression on his face. He sat down and looked at Ivy with a more serious gaze. "I'm sorry about that," he said, his voice a little more reserved now. I didn't mean to make things awkward. Ivy shook her head. No, it's fine. Work calls, right? He nodded but seemed hesitant. Yeah, but there's something I need to tell you. About last night. Ivy's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? She had no idea where this was going. Kevin took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. I should have been upfront with you from the beginning. I'm not just some guy working in tech. I own a company. I'm, well, a millionaire. Ivy blinked, not sure how to process what he had just said. Her mind reeled, trying to catch up. He was a millionaire? The man she had just been talking to was not just an ordinary guy, he was *rich star. I didn't want to tell you right away, Kevin continued, his voice soft. I wanted you to see me for who I am, not my money. Ivy sat in stunned silence. Her mind was racing, but she couldn't find the words to respond. Was this some kind of test? Why had he waited so long to tell her? Ivy sat there, staring at Kevin in stunned silence, her mind racing. He was a millionaire? How could she not have known? Everything he had said about working in tech, about his foundation, none of it made sense now. He owned a company, and he had kept it a secret this whole time. A small laugh escaped her lips, almost without meaning to, as she tried to process what he had just revealed. This is crazy, she thought. I've been sitting here this whole time thinking he was just like me, struggling through life, and now he's telling me he's a millionaire. Kevin seemed to notice the confusion in her eyes. I know this is a lot to take in, he said softly, his voice calm, almost apologetic. But I didn't want you to see me differently. I didn't want you to think I was just another rich guy trying to buy affection. I wanted to see if there was something real here, something more than money. Ivy blinked, trying to steady herself. She had never thought about Kevin that way. She had seen him as a person, not as a walking bank account. But now that she knew the truth, everything felt different. The balance between them felt off, and she wasn't sure how to navigate it. So, what now? Ivy asked, her voice shaking slightly. Do you expect me to just forget all of this? To pretend that nothing's changed? Kevin shook his head quickly. No, I don't expect that. I just want you to know that I'm still the same person you met last night. This is just a part of me. It doesn't define who I am, and it doesn't change how I feel about you. Ivy felt a knot form in her stomach. She wanted to believe him, truly. But she wasn't sure if she could. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she had started to like him, not because he was rich, but because he had been kind, genuine, and attentive. But now, all of that seemed to be overshadowed by his wealth. She couldn't help but wonder if everything had been part of some grand plan. I need some time, Ivy said quietly, looking away from him. I need time to figure this out. Kevin nodded, his expression softening. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to pressure you. Ivy stood up from the table, feeling the weight of the conversation pressing on her chest. She felt conflicted, torn between the person she had gotten to know over the last few days and the man he had just revealed himself to be. Does he really like me, or is this all just some game to him? She didn't know. I'll text you, she said, turning toward the door. Kevin didn't try to stop her. He simply nodded, his eyes watching her leave, filled with uncertainty and maybe a bit of regret. As Ivy stepped out into the bright sunlight, she took a deep breath. She had to clear her head. She couldn't keep going in circles, wondering what was real and what wasn't. She needed to make a decision, and she couldn't do that unless she understood her own feelings first. The next few days were a blur. Ivy found herself distracted at work, going through the motions without really being present. She kept replaying her meeting with Kevin over and over in her mind, trying to make sense of it all. He had been kind, yes, but was that enough? She had never been one to care about money or status, but now that it was a part of the equation, she didn't know how to feel. Finally, after a few days of uncertainty, Ivy texted Kevin. "Can we meet again?" she wrote, her fingers trembling as she hit send. Kevin replied almost immediately, agreeing to meet her at a cafe near her apartment. When they saw each other, the tension was palpable. Neither of them knew exactly what to say. Kevin smiled first, breaking the silence. "I'm glad you reached out," he said softly, his voice warm but tentative. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation. I understand if things have changed for you. I just want you to know that I'm not looking for anything other than the chance to get to know you better." Ivy met his gaze, her heart pounding. She wanted to trust him. She really did. But how could she know if he was being honest? How could she know if his feelings were real? "I don't know what to say," Ivy confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I like you, Kevin. I really do. But everything feels so complicated now." Kevin's expression softened, and he reached out, placing his hand gently on top of hers. "I understand," he said quietly. "And I'm not asking for you to make any decisions right now. I just want to be honest with you, and I want to be here, whether as a friend or something more, that's up to you. No pressure." Ivy looked down at their hands, her mind swirling with emotions. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that Kevin was right about one thing: he hadn't pressured her. He had given her space, and that meant something. She took a deep breath, looking back up at him. "Okay," she said softly. "I think I'm ready to give this a chance." Kevin's eyes lit up, and for the first time in days, Ivy felt like she was making the right decision. She had no idea where this would lead, but for now, she was willing to take a leap of faith. Ivy arrived at the cafe early, her heart beating faster than usual. She had agreed to meet Kevin again, but she wasn't sure what would happen next. Her mind was still in a whirlwind from the conversation they had last time, where she finally decided to give their connection a chance. As she walked in, she scanned the room, looking for him. There he was, sitting at a table near the window, looking as calm and composed as ever. A part of her wanted to run in the opposite direction, but she kept her nerves in check and walked toward him. "Hey," she said softly as she approached. Kevin looked up from his phone, his face lighting up with a warm smile. "Hey, Ivy," he replied, standing up to greet her. She sat down, feeling the familiar tension from before, but also something else, something that felt different this time, like a small spark of hope. "How have you been?" Kevin asked, his voice genuine. Ivy hesitated for a moment before answering. "I've been okay," she said, glancing at the coffee menu. "Just trying to figure things out." "I know things have been a little complicated," Kevin said, his expression soft. "But I appreciate you giving this a chance. I really do." Ivy smiled faintly, still unsure where this was going. Could it really be this simple? Could she really just let go of her doubts and see where this went? The thought made her anxious, but she tried to push it aside. "I'm glad we're doing this," she said finally, meeting his gaze. "I'm still not sure about everything, but I think I owe it to myself to see where this could go." Kevin nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "That's all I want, Ivy. I'm not expecting anything right away. I just want to get to know you better." There was something reassuring in his words, something that made Ivy feel like she wasn't rushing into anything. As the conversation flowed, Ivy found herself relaxing. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, and their fears. Ivy shared how she had always dreamed of opening an art studio, and Kevin listened attentively, asking questions, showing genuine interest in her life. For the first time, Ivy didn't feel like she had to pretend to be something she wasn't. She didn't feel out of place in his world. There was no mention of his wealth, no talk of business deals, just two people talking about life. She found herself smiling more than she had in weeks, and as they laughed over a shared joke, Ivy realized something important: maybe Kevin wasn't just the millionaire he had revealed himself to be. Maybe he was more than that. As they finished their coffee, Ivy looked at him, a new sense of clarity washing over her. "I think I'm starting to understand you a little more now," she said, her voice softer than before. Kevin leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on hers. "What do you mean?" he asked, intrigued. Ivy paused for a moment, trying to find the right words. "You're not just some rich guy trying to impress me. You've been genuine from the start, and that means something to me." Kevin smiled, the warmth in his eyes unmistakable. "I'm glad you see that," he said quietly. "I know I didn't give you the best first impression, but I'm willing to work for this. If you'll let me." Ivy felt a small, tentative smile tug at the corners of her lips. "I'm willing to give it a chance," she said, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. As they stood up to leave, Kevin turned to her, his expression serious yet kind. "I'm glad we're on the same page. I promise, Ivy, I'm not going anywhere. I want to build something real with you." His words sent a shiver down her spine, but in a good way. Ivy didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was taking a step in the right direction. They left the cafe together, walking side by side, the tension between them now replaced with a sense of possibility. Ivy didn't know where this was going, but she knew one thing for sure: she was ready to find out. And as they walked down the street, with the world around them bustling and alive, Ivy allowed herself to hope, for the first time in a long time, that maybe, just maybe, she had found something worth believing in. Ivy walked through the quiet streets of the city, the evening air crisp and fresh against her skin. Her mind kept replaying the conversation with Kevin from earlier that day. It had been different this time. There was no tension, no awkwardness. For the first time since meeting him, Ivy felt like she was actually seeing the real Kevin, the man behind the money, behind the polished image. She had been hesitant at first, unsure whether his wealth would always overshadow who he was as a person. But as they spoke more, as he shared stories of his childhood and his dreams, Ivy began to see the man she had been getting to know wasn't just defined by his bank account. He was kind, driven, and thoughtful, and that made all the difference. Ivy's phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Kevin. "I know you've had a lot to think about, but I want you to know I'm here for you, no matter what you decide. Take your time." Ivy smiled softly, feeling a warmth in her chest. He hadn't pressured her, hadn't tried to rush her into anything. He had simply given her the space to figure things out on her own. It was exactly what she needed. As she made her way back home, Ivy couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. Just a few weeks ago, she had felt completely lost, unsure of her future, and now, she was beginning to feel like she had a chance at something more. Something real. She entered her apartment, the familiar quiet of her small living space wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch, her mind still racing. She had been so focused on the differences between her world and Kevin's, but maybe that wasn't what mattered most. Maybe what mattered was the connection they shared, the way they understood each other, even when things were uncertain. Ivy let out a sigh, leaning back into the cushions. She was beginning to realize that her fear had been holding her back, keeping her from taking the steps she needed to move forward. The fear of being judged, the fear of not measuring up, it had all seemed so overwhelming at first. But now, with each passing day, she felt stronger, more confident in herself and her ability to handle whatever came her way. She was ready to stop hiding from her own feelings. As if on cue, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Kevin. Ivy hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hey," she said, her voice still a little uncertain but calmer than it had been before. "Hey, Ivy," Kevin's voice came through the phone, warm and familiar. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said earlier, and I just want to make sure you know that I'm not rushing you. Take all the time you need." Ivy smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate that." She paused, biting her lip. "I've been thinking, too. And I think I'm ready to move forward. I want to see where this goes." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and Ivy held her breath, waiting for his response. "I'm glad to hear that," Kevin finally said, his voice softer now. "I'm here for you, Ivy. And I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere. Ivy's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of calm. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that with Kevin, she could take it one step at a time. The next few days passed in a blur, each one feeling more like a dream than reality. Ivy and Kevin spent more time together, slowly building their relationship, learning more about each other with each passing day. They explored the city, had long talks over coffee, and shared quiet moments in between. Ivy found herself growing more and more comfortable in his presence, no longer feeling the need to put up walls or hold back. She realized that she had been afraid of what might happen if she let herself truly connect with him, but now, that fear seemed small compared to the possibility of something real. It was a Saturday afternoon when Kevin invited her to a charity event he was hosting for his foundation. Ivy was hesitant at first, not sure if she was ready to be in the spotlight, but Kevin reassured her. "It's not about the event, Ivy," he said. "It's about being with you. I want to share this part of my life with you, if you're ready." Ivy took a deep breath, her nerves bubbling up again. Am I really ready for this? She thought. But she didn't want to let her fears hold her back any longer. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm ready." The event was held in a beautiful ballroom, the soft glow of chandeliers casting an elegant light over the room. Ivy stood by Kevin's side, feeling a little out of place at first. But as the evening went on, she began to feel more at ease. Kevin introduced her to some of his closest friends and colleagues, and they all treated her with kindness and respect. She realized that she didn't need to be anyone other than herself. As the night wore on, Ivy stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Kevin joined her, standing beside her in comfortable silence. "Thank you for being here," he said softly, his voice warm. Ivy turned to him, her heart full. "I'm glad to be here," she replied. "And I'm glad I'm with you." Kevin smiled, taking her hand in his. "Me too, Ivy." "Me too." In that moment, Ivy knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. With him. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to let herself fall. She was ready to take this journey, together. Ivy walked through the quiet streets of the city, the evening air crisp and fresh against her skin. Her mind kept replaying the conversation with Kevin from earlier that day. It had been different this time, there was no tension, no awkwardness. For the first time since meeting him, Ivy felt like she was actually seeing the real Kevin, the man behind the money, behind the polished image. She had been hesitant at first, unsure whether his wealth would always overshadow who he was as a person. But as they spoke more, as he shared stories of his childhood and his dreams, Ivy began to see the man she had been getting to know wasn't just defined by his bank account. He was kind, driven, and thoughtful, and that made all the difference. Ivy's phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Kevin. "I know you've had a lot to think about, but I want you to know I'm here for you, no matter what you decide. Take your time." Ivy smiled softly, feeling a warmth in her chest. He hadn't pressured her, hadn't tried to rush her into anything. He had simply given her the space to figure things out on her own. It was exactly what she needed. As she made her way back home, Ivy couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. Just a few weeks ago, she had felt completely lost, unsure of her future, and now, she was beginning to feel like she had a chance at something more. Something real. She entered her apartment, the familiar quiet of her small living space wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch, her mind still racing. She had been so focused on the differences between her world and Kevin's, but maybe that wasn't what mattered most. Maybe what mattered was the connection they shared, the way they understood each other, even when things were uncertain. Ivy let out a sigh, leaning back into the cushions. She was beginning to realize that her fear had been holding her back, keeping her from taking the steps she needed to move forward. The fear of being judged, the fear of not measuring up, it had all seemed so overwhelming at first. But now, with each passing day, she felt stronger, more confident in herself and her ability to handle whatever came her way. She was ready to stop hiding from her own feelings. As if on cue, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Kevin. Ivy hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hey," she said, her voice still a little uncertain but calmer than it had been before. "Hey, Ivy," Kevin's voice came through the phone, warm and familiar. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said earlier, and I just want to make sure you know that I'm not rushing you. Take all the time you need." Ivy smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate that." She paused, biting her lip. "I've been thinking, too. And I think I'm ready to move forward. I want to see where this goes." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and Ivy held her breath, waiting for his response. "I'm glad to hear that," Kevin finally said, his voice softer now. "I'm here for you, Ivy. And I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere." Ivy's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of calm. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that with Kevin, she could take it one step at a time. The next few days passed in a blur, each one feeling more like a dream than reality. Ivy and Kevin spent more time together, slowly building their relationship, learning more about each other with each passing day. They explored the city, had long talks over coffee, and shared quiet moments in between. Ivy found herself growing more and more comfortable in his presence, no longer feeling the need to put up walls or hold back. She realized that she had been afraid of what might happen if she let herself truly connect with him, but now, that fear seemed small compared to the possibility of something real. It was a Saturday afternoon when Kevin invited her to a charity event he was hosting for his foundation. Ivy was hesitant at first, not sure if she was ready to be in the spotlight, but Kevin reassured her. "It's not about the event, Ivy," he said. "It's about being with you. I want to share this part of my life with you, if you're ready." Ivy took a deep breath, her nerves bubbling up again. Am I really ready for this? She thought. But she didn't want to let her fears hold her back any longer. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm ready." The event was held in a beautiful ballroom, the soft glow of chandeliers casting an elegant light over the room. Ivy stood by Kevin's side, feeling a little out of place at first. But as the evening went on, she began to feel more at ease. Kevin introduced her to some of his closest friends and colleagues, and they all treated her with kindness and respect. She realized that she didn't need to be anyone other than herself. As the night wore on, Ivy stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Kevin joined her, standing beside her in comfortable silence. "Thank you for being here," he said softly, his voice warm. Ivy turned to him, her heart full. "I'm glad to be here," she replied. "And I'm glad I'm with you." Kevin smiled, taking her hand in his. "Me too, Ivy. Me too." In that moment, Ivy knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. With him. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to let herself fall. She was ready to take this journey, together. Ivy sat by the window in her small apartment, the soft hum of the city below barely reaching her ears. It had been a few weeks since the charity event, and since that night, everything had begun to change. She and Kevin were growing closer, their connection stronger with each passing day. The uncertainty that once clouded her mind had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet but certain feeling of trust. She had been so afraid of opening up, afraid that the differences between their worlds, his wealth, his status, everything that seemed so far out of reach, would be a barrier she couldn't cross. But now, she was beginning to realize that the true connection between them had nothing to do with money or appearances. It was about the people they were when they were together. Kevin had never treated her like someone beneath him, never expected her to change. He had just accepted her for who she was. And that acceptance had slowly begun to melt the walls Ivy had built around herself. She had always prided herself on being independent, on not needing anyone. But Kevin had shown her that sometimes, needing someone wasn't a weakness, it was part of what made life beautiful. The way he cared for her, supported her, listened to her, it was different than anything she had experienced before. As Ivy sat there, reflecting on everything that had happened, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Kevin. "I'm planning something special for us this weekend. I want to take you somewhere. Are you free?" Ivy smiled at the message. Kevin had always been full of surprises, but she had learned to trust him completely. "I'm free," she replied. "Where are we going?" "It's a surprise," Kevin texted back. "But I promise it will be worth it." Ivy felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. She had never been one for grand gestures, but she had a feeling this one would be different. The weekend arrived, and Kevin picked her up in a sleek black car, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a hint of excitement. "Where are we going?" Ivy asked, her curiosity piqued. Kevin grinned, glancing at her as he drove. "You'll see soon enough." The drive took them out of the city, and Ivy noticed the scenery changing as they left the hustle and bustle behind. The trees were taller, the air fresher. She felt a sense of calm wash over her, the weight of the city lifting off her shoulders. Eventually, they arrived at a quiet lakeside retreat. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden glow over the water. Ivy stepped out of the car, her breath catching at the sight of the peaceful surroundings. It was nothing like the busy streets she was used to. It was serene, untouched. Kevin led her to a small dock by the water, where a private boat was waiting. "I thought we could spend the evening on the lake," he said, his voice low and warm. "Just the two of us." Ivy was speechless. She had never imagined something like this, a quiet escape from everything. As they boarded the boat and drifted out onto the water, Ivy felt the weight of the world slip away. For the first time in a long time, she felt completely at ease, completely present in the moment. The sky had turned deep blue, and the stars were beginning to appear, twinkling above them. They sat in comfortable silence, the sound of the water gently lapping against the boat filling the space between them. Kevin reached over and took her hand in his touch warm and reassuring. "I know things have been complicated," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "But I'm glad we're here. Together." Ivy squeezed his hand, her heart swelling. "Me too," she whispered. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to share it with you." Kevin smiled, his eyes reflecting the stars above. "That's all I needed to hear," he said softly. The boat drifted slowly across the lake, and Ivy felt a peace settle over her that she hadn't known in a long time. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the fancy surprises. It was about the simple moments they shared, the quiet understanding, the way they supported each other without question. As the night wore on, they talked, laughed, and enjoyed each other's company in a way that felt effortless, natural. When they finally returned to the shore, the stars were high in the sky, and Ivy felt like she was stepping into a new chapter of her life. The path ahead was still uncertain, but she knew she wasn't walking it alone. With Kevin by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, she was certain that this, whatever it was exactly where she was meant to be. Ivy woke up the next morning with the soft glow of the sun peeking through her window, the memories of the previous night still fresh in her mind. The evening on the lake had been perfect, everything she had needed without even knowing it, peace, clarity, and a sense of belonging. Kevin had been right by her side, and as they had shared quiet moments, the weight of her worries had lifted. For the first time in a long time, Ivy felt like she had found a place in the world. She hadn't realized just how much she had been holding on to, how much fear and doubt had been clouding her heart. But with Kevin, things were different. He had made her feel seen, understood, and accepted. She smiled to herself as she made her coffee, thinking back to the warmth in his voice, the way he had looked at her last night. He wasn't just the millionaire businessman she had first thought him to be. He was kind, genuine, and more than anything, he was willing to share his life with her. As Ivy sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Kevin. "Good morning, Ivy. I hope you slept well. I was thinking about you. Let's go for a walk today, if you're free." Ivy felt a flutter in her chest as she read his message. It was simple, but it made her heart skip a beat. "Good morning," she typed back. A walk sounds perfect. Where should we go? Kevin replied almost instantly, meet me at the park at noon. I'll bring coffee. Ivy smiled as she put her phone down. The simplicity of it all felt comforting. She hadn't realized how much she had longed for moments like this, moments that didn't involve chaos or stress, just time spent with someone who cared. When noon came, Ivy met Kevin at the park, just like they had planned. He was waiting near the fountain, a coffee cup in hand. His smile was warm, and when he saw her, his face lit up, as if the sight of her made everything else fade into the background. Hey, you, he said, his voice light and easy. Ivy felt a rush of happiness as she approached him, taking in the peaceful surroundings of the park. It was a beautiful day, with the sun shining down and the sound of birds singing in the trees. Hey, she said back, feeling her nerves ease as she stood next to him. How are you? Kevin smiled, offering her the coffee. I'm good now, he said with a wink. Now that you're here. Ivy laughed softly, accepting the coffee. Well, I'm glad I could make your day better, she said, taking a sip of the drink. This is exactly what I needed. They started walking along the path, the soft crunch of gravel under their feet the only sound breaking the silence. As they walked side by side, Ivy couldn't help but think about how far they had come in such a short time. The relationship between them had grown naturally, like a seed slowly blossoming into something real. There was no pressure, no rush, just two people getting to know each other and enjoying each other's company. As they walked, Kevin began to talk about his work, sharing a few stories about his latest projects. Ivy listened intently, fascinated by the way he spoke with such passion about his foundation and the ways he hoped to make a difference. She had always admired people who used their success to help others, and hearing Kevin speak about his work made her admire him even more. You really care about this, don't you? Ivy asked, looking up at him. Kevin nodded, his expression serious. I do, he said quietly. It's not just about making money or having a name. It's about using what I have to help others. To leave the world a little better than I found it. Ivy smiled, touched by his sincerity. I can see that, she said softly. It's rare to meet someone who really believes in making a difference. Kevin glanced at her, his expression softening. It's one of the reasons I wanted to share this with you, he said. Because I think you get it. You understand the importance of making things count. Ivy felt a lump form in her throat. She had always wanted to make a difference, too, but hearing Kevin speak about it so openly made her realize that maybe she had been holding herself back. I want to help people, too, she admitted. I've always dreamed of opening my own art studio, a place where young artists can find their voice. But sometimes I'm afraid it's too big of a dream, too much for someone like me. Kevin stopped walking for a moment, turning to face her. Ivy, he said, his voice steady, your dreams are worth pursuing. You don't have to do it alone. I'll support you, whatever it takes. Ivy looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. For the first time, she felt like someone truly believed in her, someone who saw her potential, not just the person she was today, but the person she could become. Thank you, she whispered. That means more than you know. Kevin smiled, reaching out to take her hand in his. You've got this, he said softly. And I'm right here with you, every step of the way. As they continued their walk, Ivy realized that she wasn't alone anymore. With Kevin by her side, she felt like she could take on anything, like she was capable of turning her dreams into reality. The future was still uncertain, but with him, she knew it would be full of possibility. Ivy stood on the balcony of her apartment, the soft evening breeze brushing against her skin as she looked out at the city skyline. It had been several months since that first blind date, the one that had started with so much awkwardness and uncertainty, and now, everything felt different. Her life had taken a turn she never could have imagined. The dreams she had once thought were too big were now within her reach, and it wasn't just because of Kevin's support. It was because she had learned to believe in herself, to take risks, and to step into a future she had once only dreamed about. Kevin had stood by her side, offering his unwavering support, not because he thought she needed fixing, but because he believed in her potential. And that belief had given her the courage to pursue her art studio, to put her ideas into action. Ivy smiled softly as she thought about the new space she had just opened. The grand opening was just a few weeks away, and she was finally seeing the fruits of her hard work. It had been a leap of faith, but with every step, she had felt more certain that this was the right path for her. The studio was everything she had dreamed of, a place where young artists could come together, share their work, and feel inspired. It wasn't just a space for creativity, it was a community, a place for growth and connection. And it had all started with the small steps she had taken, the steps that had led her to Kevin and to this moment. She was still amazed by how much had changed in such a short time. There had been struggles, of course, but every challenge had only made her stronger. And through it all, Kevin had been there, not as a savior, but as a partner, someone who supported her without taking over, someone who encouraged her to find her own way. As Ivy stood there, lost in her thoughts, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out to find a message from Kevin. "I'm thinking about you, as always. I was wondering if you'd like to join me for dinner tonight. There's a place I've been wanting to try, and I think it would be the perfect evening for us." Ivy's heart fluttered at the message. It had been a busy week with the studio launch preparations, and she had barely had a chance to catch her breath. The thought of spending a quiet evening with Kevin sounded perfect. She quickly typed back, "Dinner sounds amazing. I'll be ready." Kevin's reply came quickly, "I'll pick you up at 7. Can't wait to see you." She smiled as she put the phone down, feeling a warmth spread through her. She had come a long way from that nervous girl who had been unsure of herself, unsure of her future. Now, she was a woman with a purpose, with a vision, and with someone who believed in her every step of the way. Later that evening, Kevin picked her up as promised. As they drove to the restaurant, they talked about everything and nothing, work, their plans for the future, the little things that made their days better. When they arrived at the restaurant, a cozy little bistro tucked away on a quiet street, Ivy felt a sense of contentment she hadn't experienced before. The soft candlelight, the intimate atmosphere, it was all perfect. They sat down at a small table, and as they ordered their food, Ivy realized just how far they had come together. Kevin had been there for her from the beginning, encouraging her when she was unsure, supporting her when she needed it most. And now, as she looked at him across the table, she realized that everything she had hoped for was unfolding right in front of her. "I'm proud of you," Kevin said softly, his voice full of warmth and sincerity. "You've worked so hard to get here, and you deserve everything you're building." Ivy smiled, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice quiet but full of meaning. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Kevin reached across the table and took her hand in his touch gentle but firm. "I'll always believe in you, Ivy," he said. "And I'll always be here to support you, no matter what." The moment felt timeless, like everything had finally clicked into place. Ivy felt her heart swell with gratitude. She had found something rare, something real, a love built on trust, mutual respect, and the freedom to be who they truly were. As the evening went on, Ivy knew that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges, no doubt, but together, they would face whatever came their way. And for the first time in her life, Ivy wasn't afraid. She wasn't afraid to take risks, to go after what she wanted, and to build a future with someone who cared for her, truly cared for her. As they finished their meal and stepped out into the cool night air, Ivy realized that this was just the beginning. She had found a partner in every sense of the word. And no matter where life took them, she knew they would always face it together, side by side.